Say, God sufficeth all things, above all things. Say, God sufficeth. Say, God sufficeth all things, above all things. Say, God sufficeth. Say, God sufficeth all things, above all things. And nothing in the heavens or in the earth but God sufficeth. Nothing in the heavens or in the earth but God sufficeth. Say, God sufficeth. Say, God sufficeth. Verily, He is in Himself the knower, the sustainer, the omnipotent.
When the Bab announced his mission in May of 1844, he was only 25 years old. But the truth was, he had always shown signs of being a very extraordinary person. He was born Sayyid Ali Muhammad in Shiraz on October 20th, 1819. His father died when he was a child, and his uncle became his guardian. Soon after he started school, his teacher sent him home, saying that there was nothing he could teach such a gifted child. His uncle wasn't happy to hear this, and told him to just try and act like the other children. He did his best, but it was clear that he wasn't like his fellow pupils. And it wasn't just his intelligence. Even as a child, his character and gentleness were equally impressive to everyone who knew him. When the Bab was only 16, he was already managing his uncle's business in Bushehr, and there his reputation for fairness and being just grew. One story goes that a man who gave him goods to sell received more in payment than he expected, because the Bab explained if the market was at its best, the goods would have fetched that amount. And it wasn't only his friends and acquaintances who recognized his greatness. At this time, there lived an important Islamic scholar named Sayyid Kazem. People flocked from all over to hear him speak about the coming of the Promised One. One day, Sayyid Kazem summoned his pupil Hassan to come to his house before dawn. When he arrived, Sayyid Kazem announced that a highly distinguished person had arrived in the city and that they had to visit him. They set off and soon came to a house where a youth in a green turban was waiting at the door. He greeted them lovingly, and Hassan was amazed by the reverence his renowned teacher showed to this young man. 3 days later, the youth arrived at one of Sayyid Kazem's lectures. When the Sayyid saw him, he said, "Lo, the truth is more manifest than the ray of light that has fallen upon that lap." Hassan could then see a ray of light had fallen upon the lap of the youth. One of the Sayyid's disciples spoke up then, asking why he didn't just reveal the name of the Promised One if he knew it. Sayyid Kazem shook his head and pointed with his finger to his own throat, implying that if he spoke, they would both be in mortal danger. 3 years later, the Bab did, of course, announce his mission, and just as Sayyid Kazem had predicted, he ended up giving his life for that announcement.
By 1850, thousands of people from every walk of life across Persia had become Babis, and the authorities decided that the only way to stop this new religion was to execute the Bab. And so it was decreed that on July the 9th, 1850, the Bab was to be executed by firing squad. The Bab was imprisoned in Tabriz with some of his followers. Among them was a young man named Anis, who begged to be allowed to die with his beloved. On the morning of the 9th of July, the Bab was calmly dictating to his secretary when the head attendant of the prison announced that it was time for the execution. Though he wasn't finished, he agreed to go, saying to the attendant, "Not until I have said to him all those things that I wish to say, can any earthly power silence me. Though all the world be armed against me, yet shall it be powerless to deter me from fulfilling to the last word my intention." The Bab and Anis were led in chains to the barrack square, with thousands of spectators crowding the rooftops all around. Sam Khan, the colonel of the regiment, who had been ordered to carry out the execution, explained to the Bab that he was a Christian and had no desire to execute an innocent man. The Bab told him not to worry. Follow your instructions, and if your intention be sincere, the Almighty is surely able to relieve you of your perplexity. A spike was driven into a pillar, and 2 ropes were fastened to it from which the Bab and Anis were suspended. Sam Khan gave the order, and his regiment opened fire. As the dense smoke from the rifles cleared, the bewildered spectators could see that Anis stood there, unhurt, and that the Bab had vanished. This remarkable occurrence was reported on by a number of foreign journalists and diplomats. On July 22, 1850, the British minister in Persia, Lieutenant Colonel Shield, described the scene in his report to Lord Palmerston, the British Foreign Secretary. When the smoke and dust cleared away after the volley, Bab was not to be seen, and the populace proclaimed that he had ascended to the skies. A frenzied search soon found the Bab in his cell, calmly completing his business with his secretary. "I have finished my conversation with Syed Hussein. Now you may proceed to fulfill your intention." The chief attendant remembered their earlier conversation and immediately resigned his post. Sam Khan also remembered the words of the Bab and ordered his men to leave the barracks immediately. Another group of soldiers arrived, and the Bab and Anis were once again suspended together on the wall. The new regiment opened fire, and this time they were killed. Their bodies were torn apart by bullets, but their faces were largely unmarked. The authorities threw their mangled bodies outside the gates of the city in the hope that they would be devoured by wild animals. But that night, the bodies of the Bab and Anis were secretly rescued by the Babis. Their bodies were lovingly preserved and hidden. In 1909, they were finally interred at what is now known as the Shrine of the Bab on Mount Carmel in Israel. The execution of the Bab on July the 9th, 1850, wasn't the ending envisaged by his persecutors, because, as the first of the twin manifestations of God, the Bab had opened the way for him whom God shall make manifest. And so, the execution of the Bab was simply the end of the beginning.